Uhuru. My name is Coco Lewis. I'm the International Executive Economic Development Coordinator of ANWO, African National Women's Organization, and I'm your MC for tonight's political education. African Women Must Lead with Yejide or Amila is a series of live monthly political education programs from the African National Women's Organization, led by President Yejide or Amila. Tonight's topic is it fascism or the same old colonialism? Repression and oppression in 2024. President Yejide will present a timeline of colonial aggression that presently would be called fascist. But what is fascism? Except the same oppressive conditions African and other colonized people have experienced that has made its way into the ruling class sector of society. There will be opportunities to raise issues about this PE during the Q&A period. Please consider please consider donating if you enjoy this content. Is the icon right there or right here? The African National Women's Organization is engaged in two major projects in the African community and needs your support to continue the work. Thank you for everyone who has made it possible to complete phase one, which is to replace the roof of the Annual Liberation Center. Because of your donations, we're able to raise $8,400 to pay the contractor who is currently on the job as we speak. We can't wait to show you the finished product. We are still raising funds to start phase two, which will be working on the interior of the building. So our goal tonight is to raise $250. You don't have to wait until the end of the program. Donate at any time at annualuhuru.org/donate or use your phone to scan the QR code on the screen. But please comment and engage throughout the program. African Women Must Lead is being multi-streamed live on the Burning Spirit TV and Annual channels on YouTube, Annual's Facebook page, and hopefully on our Instagram. Please take the time to like, share, and follow us on these platforms. Annual is also on Instagram and Twitter, or X, for those folks who want to keep up to date with what we're doing between broadcasts. If you'd like to know the exact dates for future streams, make sure to follow us and check out our website for details. Uhuru, welcome, President Yeshide.
Uhuru, comrade, thank you so much for that introduction, and thank you so much for the people who are tuned in so far. And I'm really excited. We had a break in July, a much needed break, and we are back again to carry out the rest of our year with our two monthly programs. So I appreciate you with that introduction. I do also want to encourage people to donate toward our projects and help us meet and exceed our $250 goal for this live stream. Uhuru. Thank you. So I am doing this PE around fascism or colonialism because I'm hearing this all of the time. It's all over the news waves. It's all over the social movements. It is a term that has really started to be applied to just the rise of the right wing in the United States and the right wing overall across the world, right? Like there are right wing movements, and the right wing is basically characterized as ultra nationalist, primarily white people in white countries in Europe. And although there are fascist movements that may come up in other non-white places, but for the most part, when you think of fascism, you think of Europe, you think of white people and neo-Nazis, things like that. And more since the presidential electoral race and also electoral politics in this country, we are starting to see, not starting, we are hearing and seeing references to fascism, and what does that mean to African people, and why is it that my response, like, and other African people's response is like, Okay, I don't know what fascism is, but I know exactly what I've been going through. And what fascism is being described as the stuff that, generationally African people have been experiencing in this country and other colonized people have been experiencing in this country and abroad, right? So when we look at the history of African people in this country in particular, no parts of it hasn't been oppressive, repressive, antagonistic, violent. And the way that people are internalizing that now is now they want to put this moniker of fascism on it, because for the most part, white people are experiencing the same. I won't say the same. It's definitely not the same, but they're experiencing levels of oppression that you know, um, would have them really checking out or trying to understand like what their leadership is doing and trying to figure out like why is this happening and how they can stop this and that. And, I work in a space where I'm around movement organizers and the tone is demoralization, right? Like, they're talking about the state of the country and the state of democracy as they understand it, and really trying to enlist America's promise, right? Like the promise of the founding, basically of the founding of this nation. There was a promise to all of its people and all of its citizens that African people have not yet achieved. And African organizers want to make this America the democracy that will allow for African people to achieve the sort of equality and all of the things that America has promised us, right? Promised African people, colonized people, as a result of being a citizen here. However, the founding of this country was not democratic. The founding of this country was raised in violence. It was not something that was put under negotiation. The chairman has laid this out on so many occasions. And, as African internationalists, we understand that the fundamental underpinning of the capitalist system itself is colonialism. Like the colonialism made way for worldwide imperialism, made capitalism possible because of the dominating of people in places around the world. You would not be able to have a capitalist system without the stealing and violence that are carried out against peoples and places. So, you wouldn't be able to have the raw material to produce this or that. You wouldn't be able to have the cheap labor, the workers, all of that if it wasn't for the military arm of the colonizers that would impose violence on people, impose laws, impose all of these restrictions or policies that would flow the population into producing for the colonizer itself. So I'm going to use this program tonight and talk a little bit about what fascism is, how it is being interpreted, what ways of people defining it. And then draw that comparison to colonialism. Now, I'm going to readily admit, like when I hear the word fascism, I don't find that it is a term that I am ready to accept, and I don't, for a number of reasons, because I feel like people are trying to use this word to kind of like obscure the colonial contradiction. We're all being attacked by fascists, right? Like we're all dealing with the right, and the right is trying to do so many things to the people. And I'm just like, and I think when you use the term fascism, you're now lumping everyone underneath this identity as being the so-called left, or the people who are being oppressed by the government, as opposed to really dissecting around the question of colonialism, because then you can't say that fascism is a thing, because fascism is a relatively new invention, right? Like, from Europe. So I'm going to do something different tonight. I do have a slideshow, and that won't take up the whole show, but I do have a slideshow just to help keep me on track. And so I am going to, here we go. There we go. Gotta figure things out. So is it fascism or colonialism, repression and oppression in 2024? And Let's see. So, what is fascism? And I read an article that was written in 2023 that attempted to, I think, very successfully define what fascism is and how people are being perceived, how it is being perceived by it. And this article was on Truth Out, and I'm sorry I didn't copy down the title of the article, but this is an excerpt from that article. It says fascism is an ultranationalist, anti-democratic, far-right movement. As author Shane Burley points out, fascism is a set of political practices fundamentally based in upholding rigid, identity based hierarchies. These hierarchies manifest as forms of supremacy depending on the country and cultural context. For example, fascist movements can be white supremacists, nativists, male supremacists, Christian supremacists, and more. Under fascism, the majority sees itself as a victimized community that's fighting against marginalized communities for its survival. So, one of the major points of this article that pulled out the whole question of attacks against LGBTQIA people and African people and other colonized people, right? And it really, and I was really trying to dissect this particular description of fascism because while I think it successfully says something, its absence is void of something. It's void of the critical, um, in-depth insight and analysis that I'm used to from African internationalism. So that's why I can't accept this as like this broad-based. Because if you did not know about your own history, if you did not understand and really internalize what you as a what I as a colonized person has experienced and what history has taught us is the experience of African people, then this by itself, like, oh yeah, like this makes sense. This is what's happening to us as a people. And I wanted to look up who Shane Burley was. I'm just like, because I believe that the whole fascist movement, anti-fascist movement, or the terminology of fascism is being led by white folks because this is now seeping into their world. So, Shane Burley is a white man. So I'm like, oh, okay, I was right. but that goes to show you like that critical analysis around colonialism is missing here. And that's why they can kind of say now that what they're experiencing is fascist because the only other examples of fascism that they have, or the only kinds of examples of oppression in the ways that they are feeling oppression now is examples from Europe, examples from, you know, Europe for the most part, and taking like example from that. So um, Wikipedia defined fascism as a far-right, authoritarian, ultra-nationalist political ideology and movement characterized by a I can't read tonight, dictatorial leader, centralized autocracy, militarism, forcible suppression of opposition, belief in a natural social hierarchy, subordination of individual interests for the perceived good of the nation or race, and strong regimentation of society and economy. Which is opposed to what they say anarchism, democracy, pluralism, egalitarianism, liberalism, socialism, and Marxism. Fascism is placed on the far right wing with the traditional left spectrum. Fascism, and I wanted to highlight this here, rose to prominence in early 20th century Europe. And the first fascist movement emerged in Italy during World War I before the spreading to other European countries, most notably Germany. And fascism also had adherents outside of Europe. So as you can see, for African people, like we didn't start in this time period in the 1920s and 30s, right? It started way before that. And let's look at some of the words and descriptions that they're using to describe what fascism is, right? In Europe. It's just characterized by ultra-nationalist political ideology, centralized autocracy, militarism, forcible suppression and opposition, a belief in a natural social hierarchy and subordination. It sounds familiar, right? So in the United States, or just overall to justify, slavery overall, the colonization of peoples and places around the world, the idea of race came into to justify that. Racism is an ideological underpinning of colonialism, right? Like it gave the basis for these white people to say that these people are the natural servants of us. And I know you've heard that before, right? Like these are it's our burden to take care of these savages, to civilize them. It's also their responsibility to be our workers. And we are naturally more advanced than white people have this ideology. We are naturally more advanced. And there was even fake pseudoscience to kind of prove this point that African people in particular, and probably other colonized people as well, had specialized bones to take pain more. Our heads were bigger, our nose were open because this served to prove in their minds the inferiority of African people. Big butts, big old lips, all these things that justified their terror against African people. And they have here a picture of, I think, Mussolini and Hitler as examples of um, dictatorial leaders. And I wanted to play this clip from Chairman who said a little bit of something, which was a lot about fascism. Okay, the sound is not working, and let me see if I can fix that really quickly. But if it's not working, there are closed captions. So I'm gonna try to fix it, but if I can't fix it, you can read. Let's keep it moving. So the chairman makes a really important point, and I can make sure that we can get the link into the chat. And once we get to the Q&A, I'll definitely be able to put that in. Um, but if you just search fascism and Chairman Omali Yeshitela on YouTube, you should be able to find this short. Um, but Chairman makes a really incredible point here, which is like, the point that we've been making so far, which is that when white people, we are on settler, this is colonized land. This land was settled by colonizers. United States, America is a settler colony. um, Point blank, period. Like there's no ifs, ands, or buts about it. There were people who were here who were making their life, making their way, and white people who were running from an oppressive regime in Europe came over in their boats. And you know the story, the Nina, the Pinta, and the Santa Maria. They landed on Plymouth Rock. They met with the Indians who greeted them and tried to help them survive. And they gave the native peoples here. Did I say this? Oh, I'm sorry, y'all. They gave the native peoples here um, disease, killed them off, and even after they killed them off with disease, they killed them off with weapons and all kinds of stuff to eliminate them. And things got antagonistic. And then after the first colony settlers basically died off, they sent some more, and they kept sending some more, and they kept sending some more. And United States essentially was, dominated by these white people battle fought battles by native people who were fighting for their territory, and still to this day continue to fight for their territory, and really expose that the fact that this is a settler colony. And that's why the whole question of like Mexico and California and Texas, I mean, all of the left side of the so-called United States is Mexico. and and in terms of the indigenous people who are part of that territory, and then there's a whole middle section of like all of this land is native people. There's a whole middle section too that was that had a strong population of native peoples. And the so when we start to think about fascism and oppression and the social hierarchy and a racial hierarchy, all of these things that started for white people in the 20s and 30s, I mean, from the founding of this country, we can see and experience, we can see and draw a correlation between the experiences of African and indigenous people who were here. And of course, the white people kept coming in droves, coming in droves. They tried to work the land, couldn't do it. They were already in Africa, brought African people over to the Americas, so to speak. First in South America, where they worked really hard, and they came on up to this territory and brought African people up here to work their land. So never at any point in the history of the founding of this country were African people seen as equal, or that the laws and policies that were being established for African people, for the settlers, were applicable to African people. That's why you have all these movements that that emerged as a result of African people and other people attempting to get their rights and attempting to use the United States Constitution. I don't want to say contradiction, but it could be named that too. And the Bill of Rights and all of these things to um, try to get their American experience based on what these documents say and what they want to uphold it to it. Um, so there we go. So, I want to pull out some key points from two of the descriptions. So it's upholding a rigid and identity-based hierarchies. That's fascism. And so, as I said before, racism is the ideological underpinning of colonialism and slavery. This is what um, this is what uh, they have used to justify the enslavement and colonization of African people and other people of color. I hate using that term, but like I want to say of color because we're talking about Asia, and India is a part of Asia, and all the brown people of the world have been really you can see the ways in which we have been treated, and and the basis for that is this racial identity, this racial hierarchy that says that because white people are better, superior, smarter, I don't know if stronger was ever in that category. I think there's a African people have been identified as being strong, but these are the things that inform white people of this time, and still it's very much prevalent, inform white people that they have superiority over us. Even very smart Africans, who have been colonized, and the ones that work for IMF, World Bank, the ones who run countries, even they have been socialized to accept this idea of inferiority based on hundreds and hundreds of years of colonial domination and what that looks like in throughout society, this inferiority and superiority dichotomy. And this, I was, the first picture you just saw a white person inspecting an African. Um, And we are now seeing Charlottesville. This was maybe like 6 or 7, maybe more than that. I'd be losing track of time. I don't believe that things are more than 10 years ago. So this wasn't more than 10 years ago. It was Charlottesville in Virginia, where all these white people came out in support of um, themselves. They built their own. They went out and got tiki torches, which of course came from originated with the indigenous people of Hawaii, and they they built their own armor. They went out into the streets to say they want to be heard because they're feeling marginalized, and that was another one of the characteristics too. The majority feel like they are being um, made small, or they're now being treated like they are no longer important, and that's that superiority um, complex. So when people talk about like white supremacy. Um, that's an idea, right? And that idea is really captured in the minds of white people. And I think what African International teaches us to say, like white power, right? Because I think if we say white supremacy, then there's an acknowledgement that white people are supreme over us. And so white power, I think, helps us understand like the question of power. It centralizes the power, like where the power lies, as opposed to like idea of supremacy, that I'm supreme over you. The idea of power is where colonizers are centering their control over us is because they have power. And when we say Black power, it contradicts that, right? Because now we're saying we have to have power in order to contradict that power, overturn that relationship, the colonial relationship that we have. So another note that they said in one of the descriptions is that it's characterized by a dictate. I can't say this word to save my life. Dictatorial leader. And they want us to believe that Trump is this fascist boogeyman come to deliver all of the white nationalist promises. And the reality is that the founding of this country and the first and 12 of the and 18 12 of the 18 presidents who held office between 1789 and 1877 owned slaves in various capacities, and they list them out: George Washington, Thomas Jefferson, James Madison, James Monroe, Andrew Jackson, Martin Van Buren, William Henry Harrison, John Tyler, James Polk, Zachary Taylor, Andrew Johnson, and Ulysses S. Grant. And these are slaveholding presidents. So Trump is not, and they're the ones talking about equality, not for Africans. And they're the ones talking about making this place a place of freedom, not for Africans, because they have enslaved African people who are under their oppression, currently working for them, occupying their homes, being raped by them. So their wombs are being occupied and colonized as well. There's a whole piece that we could say about this in terms of like the obvious contradictions. But when we talk about fascism and people who love America, love democracy, can't really draw like the fact that democracy was never democratic, right? Like it was never, because the people who created it were oppressing African people at the time that they were writing these inspirational doctrines. And there's something to be said about trying to uphold something that never existed. And I think the promise of America, whether you are right or left, is a false promise, because that even alludes to the make America great again. Just alludes to this idea of make America great again, right? Like even when people say, I want to make the promise of America the way that the documents say America should be, is like saying make America great again. and and it's also like a cast over. Like none of that other stuff matters. All we got to do is work toward this democracy that constantly puts up barriers to prevent the people who were never intended to be beneficiaries of the so-called democracy when they try to get it. So Trump is not a boogeyman. Trump is a part of the history timeline of America, just like Biden is a part of the historical timeline of America. And even though they don't fall underneath the quintessential dictatorship leader, the American system of democracy is dictatorship, right? It's a dictatorship over the survival and the thriving of African people in this country. And there's not anything that you can say that will discount the actual history and background that we can look up to prove that. So even though we don't like Trump, right? For obvious reasons, he is not unique in his thoughts and opinions as a US president. We had Reagan. Some of y'all may be too young for Reagan. I'm a little bit too young for Reagan because when he came into power, As president, I was a little itty baby, but I did grow. He was in president like twice, right? Like, so I did grow into it and understood, like, at the time that Black people did not like Reagan. Reagan did all this harmful stuff to African people and other people. Underneath him, there was horrible policy that impacted the lives of African people. I mean, and then so on and so forth. So, this is not, Trump, despite how despicable he is not some unique sort of character that just jumps on the scene and now he's a leader of all the people who are right wing. The fact is that the you know uh, the rise of people understanding or knowing about this whole Project 2025, which has been acknowledged as some fascist doctrine, some right wing doctrine, has a list of over 100 funders and endorsers that are not Trump. That Trump didn't pen a word of this. I don't think he has the capacity to pen a word of Project 2025. This is the ruling class minority of this country who are funding and attempting to move uh, politics and policies so that it won't be taken over by the so-called minority, right? Because there was an article that came out, I think it was a year, 2 years ago, that basically Project 20, it wasn't project, it was an acknowledgement that by 2045, I believe, that this country will be more so-called minorities will be the majority, right? And that put the fear of God into these white folks, right? And so they've come up with this whole strategy to make sure that even if that is the case, they still hold power in this country. And even majority of the people who may be identified as minority or people who are colonized don't necessarily have an objective to get free. So there's a whole class system, there's a whole priorities, and truly trying to figure out these things. So this idea of this solid dictator as a leader is real, but it's also for African people. Like, the dictator may be the white man sheriff in your community that allows for you to be lynched and don't do anything about it to save you, right? Like, it could be the teacher in your school. Like, there's so many instances of power trade-off in relationship to African people on a day-to-day basis, where this one solitary leader isn't the thing that creates the experiences that we have, but it's the day-to-day interactions with the police, it's the day-to-day interactions with coworkers, day-to-day interactions with local electives, day-to-day interactions with family and friends and strangers that create the so-called fascist state, which is really colonialism, and how colonialism has created a oppression against African and other colonized people. And so this is just the founding fathers of the US settler colony. So what then, if we're saying that, what we're experiencing is not fascism, and I think I kind of summed up colonialism, but I wanted to have a slide to talk about it deeper. So colonialism, as we define it, is the foreign domination of a nation or a people at the social, political, and economic expense of the dominated nation or people. And under colonialism, you will have experiences or contradictions that exist, like patriarchy, you will have racism, you will have all the isms, because colonialism requires these other sorts of oppressions to exist in order for it to maintain power over people. So slavery and colonialism gave rise to capitalism and to the capitalist ruling class in Europe, along with the white working class. So we as African internationalists also recognize that all white people sit on the pedestal of oppression of African and other people. And let's dig into that a little bit more. So there are well-meaning white folks out here in the world who are against fascism and oppression and all of these things. That does not negate the fact that you still sit on the pedestal of African oppression. And when people are saying, when there's a movement that's moving to change or shift policy or create a state where people are not oppressed, it's a hard fought battle to figure out to what end. What what is a unified outcome to your fight against fascism? Our fight against colonialism is freedom, to destroy colonialism, not to improve it, not to try to get a policy or a law to make it better, but to destroy colonialism. And when we destroy colonialism, we destroy the power dynamic that will make us colonized people. So when you're fighting against fascism, which they think is ruining American democracy or ruining democracy that may be any place else in the world, then what they hope to get is an America, so to speak, that is without fascism, which still is a settler colony. So the call then to fascist people who believe that there's a fascist rise in the United States, if fascism is destroyed, if the right wing is decimated, what then is the expectation? Are we going to go back to business as usual, or are we really going to the point where we have to destroy this relationship, this question of that's what it is, right? Like that's the question. So the fight is not against the fascist boogeyman. The fight is to end colonialism, because then when we destroy colonialism, which is the pedestal upon which white people sit, white oppressors sit, then we destroy any attempts of fascism to even emerge, which, you know, fascism is a product of colonialism. So and this is just another example of colonialism. This is the native schools. White people as settlers came here and kidnapped native people, children, and turned them into white folks. And this is exactly, and this is not unique to native people. It happens all the time. They do it through mission schools. They do it through your public education system. They do it through your higher education system. They do it through the media to whitewash and get into your brain to help you become a proud American fighting for democracy. And so, you know, colonialism represents itself in so many different ways. So examples of colonialism would be the African transatlantic slavery, Reconstruction, sharecropping, convict leasing, Jim Crow, and under Jim Crow, we had lynchings, rapes, sexual violence, voter. This is for African folks now. Okay, yeah, this is not the fascism that white people were experiencing in the early part of the 19th century. So, like Jim Crow, lynchings, rapes and sexual violence, voter restriction, racial terror, which are represented itself as white riots. So you see white people being jealous that African people were trying to pull themselves up by their bootstraps and may be more successful than others. And they would just go into these African towns and just kill people, burn down businesses, burn down resources that they need in order to help the community. And this is, you know, this is so that's when I say, like, when people talk about this unique dictator from the head that African people have been experiencing, so-called fascism in the form of colonialism, for all of our experience in this country. So in Jim Crow, and then apartheid, which is also a part of Jim Crow, legal segregation, which was enshrined in law in these United States, in Britain, in many European countries, in Africa, apart legal segregation, which is to separate the races and make determinations about who can use what sort of public facility. This is apartheid, right? And then COINTELPRO, when Black people was like, I'm not going to take this stuff no more, started to mobilize themselves to get power, to counteract the white power that was being stuffed down their throats. COINTELPRO emerged as a state organized military attack on liberation movements, in particular African liberation movements, not only here in the US, but in around the world. We've seen the military defeat of the Black Panther Party and the Black Liberation Movement in the United States. We've seen the attack against the invasion of Grenada. We've seen the invasion and attack on the Congo and the murder of Patrice Lumumba, Thomas Sankara, Amilcar Cabral, all these brave revolutionary souls who wanted to make life better for their people were stamped out. And that wasn't called fascism, was it? It was called American democracy, and it was championed as a way to continue to forward the free world. Is when you are stamping out liberation and self-determination for African people. So this is the reality that we live in. Like, colonial question for us is the central question. And then, of course, other examples of colonialism is like redlining and redlining. Oh, I do have some pictures. Okay. So that's Jim Crow style, apartheid, redlining, which is a discriminatory practice that puts services out of the reach of residents of certain areas based on race and ethnicity. And we only really have real examples when it comes to African people in this country. So not being able to get loans, not being able to purchase property, not be able to have access to resources because we are living in a specific area of the city, which we were forced to live in because of segregation and how the district might be set up. So, this is another example. Mass incarceration, the crack epidemic. I don't know. I'm old enough to know what the crack epidemic looked like. And, decades later, we understand that the crack cocaine epidemic of the 1980s was a COINTELPRO measure to decimate what was left of the Black Power movement, to basically attract genocide in our communities, increase violence, created a system of terror inside our communities. And it was implemented by the United States government to fund a war that they were having to stamp out people other places. So, I think it is really important for us to see that. And then, of course, family policing, which is not the end all be all of what we're saying here, because family policing, for those of you who don't know, is like what they call child protective services, and how that is also uh, uh, an example of um, colonization, because this is basically the pinnacle of the continuation of the slave auction block, where you kidnap people's children, African children primarily. You wrap their families up in a legal system. You tell the families that they can't talk about their child being kidnapped, or you will incarcerate them. You make sure that the children are not able to get back to their parents, so they can be adopted off somewhere. And that if they aren't adopted, the trauma is so deep and profound that those relationships between parent and child are never resolved. Which is a genocidal practice, which emerged after the defeat of the military defeat of the Black Power movement in the 1960s. So, we have to see all of these things as an attack, a colonial attack on our communities that did not come into existence because of fascist leaders or a primary fascist leader, but because of a system of colonialism that has worked since the inception of this settler colony to destroy the emergence of self-determination in the people that were never meant to have self-determination and equality and democracy underneath the guise of the U.S. American dream, right? And I wanted to highlight here that this is an example of um, this is not Gaza. This is not Syria. This is 1985 Philadelphia, when a bomb was dropped on an African community. It's the MOVE bombing. And the MOVE organization were a group of African people who believed in going back to nature and collective living and things like that. And the city of Philadelphia thought that they were a threat. So they dropped a bomb on the community, on them, killing 11 people, including children. And uh, and basically, decimating an entire community. The houses next to it caught on fire, things like that. And that's a sky view of that community. And these are the move comrades who, every last one of them, I believe, is out of prison now, but that came in the last 5 years after serving 43 years in prison. The mayor at the time, Wilson Good, is an African who I read says that he apologized for the move bombing and thought it was a misstep. However, his apology meant nothing because these comrades spent over 45 years in prison despite an apology. In spite of this apology. So, this is really, example, again, people are talking about Mussolini, Trump, Hitler as examples of fascist regimes that did something to people. But as the chairman said, like, it's only when white people start to feel like they too are experiencing the same kinds of oppression that even though it is not the same, that African people, that's what the whole Occupy movement was about. Y'all remember Occupy? Occupy. Occupy was like these college kids was just like, oh, I can't get a job. Oh, I don't have the 401k, but I thought, no, my retirement is up. Like, they were out in the park sleeping in tents, because they and protesting Wall Street because they didn't feel confident they were going to get the promise that their foreparents had given them, that they were going to have all the things that America afforded them, people who work hard and go to school and get an education. Occupiers were out in these streets, sleeping in parks, sleeping in tents, Occupy, protesting, all of these things, alongside people who were actually without, like homeless people, people who did not have resources, people who had to go to work. And these people didn't have to, they didn't go to work. They was, you know what I mean? So, like, this idea of, so when that's also like on the timeline of how people are now developing this word that's, um, um, okay. I'm sorry, I'm looking at comments and I'm a little bit distracted. Uhuru. Um, but yeah, so these are the kinds of things that people are saying are fascist things, and you cannot really, like I said, I think that fascism is a cloak for, or a tactic to not talk about the colonial question. And even if people attempt to talk about colonialism and fascism in the same breath, I don't think that it can be successful because essentially, like I said before, like, colonialism is the question. You can get rid of fascists and right wingers and all these things. You can have a progressive sort of democracy that you want, but this democracy that you are expecting is built on the oppression of indigenous and African people. You ain't giving land back. You ain't giving Mexico back. You ain't telling these white people to go back to Europe. You know what I mean? You're not destroying these laws and really destroying the foundation of it all. You're just trying to stop a group of people from getting into office to make policy that could be harmful to everybody, but has already been harmful to a majority of people in this country based on the fact of our being colonial subjects, right? Domestic colonized people. So that brings us really to the case of the who are three, but I can't get out of this webinar without talking about. But we have three of our comments under the Biden-Harris government who are being charged with being Russian agents. This is an African man and two white people who work under the leadership of the African People's Socialist Party, Chairman Omali Shatella, Penny Hess, and Jesse Neville, who have been organizing for reparations to the African community, who have been organizing to the worldwide revolution of African people, organizing in a way that has been building movements around the world, advocating and exposing the contradiction of U.S. domestic colonialism to people around the world, creating alliances with people who can forward that message, and deepening the understanding of Africans have about our own condition so that we can get to the point where we say we have to destroy this monster. And for this, the US government, as we well know, is going to challenge it. Under the Biden-Harris election presidentiality, right? These comrades were charged with being Russian foreign agents, which again is a mask for the whole question of colonialism, right? They are being prosecuted because we've been fighting against colonialism. We have been raising up the issue of colonialism, and we have been organizing to destroy colonialism, which essentially would destroy American US democracy as you know it, to ensure that African people can be free and liberated for good. And so when the US government attempts to say that the work that we have been doing to create self-determination for African people is on behalf of Russia, as you well know, this is a great insult, to African people who have been fighting for our liberation, not since the 60s, not since the 40s, but since we were first attacked and first since our bodies and our labors were used to build up this country and to litter, to build up this country. You know, and so on September 3rd, in just a few weeks, our comrades are going to trial. They are going to trial to fight for their freedom, right? To not be made political prisoners, to fight on behalf of African people still, to put the United States government on trial for these stupid charges that don't have any basis, and to really bring out the whole question of colonialism, and is calling for everybody who knows about it or who is just finding out about it to be down in Tampa and pack the courts, because the United States government is the same democratic government that you hope to change. But no matter who is in power, they're going to do the same kind of things they have done since its inception, and that is to oppress and repress African and other colonized people who are fighting for their own self-determination, in so much as they are going to charge you with being a foreign agent for a government they do not like. If you are opposed to US foreign policy or internal policy, and you protest against that. So it's not just a question of defining African colonization. It's a question of free speech, right? Because if the United States government wins in this case, it is going to have a reverberating effect on your ability to even say anything. So the fascist state that people are afraid of because they've seen it in history in Europe, which already exist, and there are cases that are being brought out to show you that it exists, is the thing that we have to fight in this moment. There is no future where fascism and the right will emerge that has not already existed and continues to exist and is happening in real time. So we say drop the charges against the Uhuru Three, hands off the Uhuru Three. And I want to encourage everybody to go over to handsoffuhuru.org/social-media-toolkit and grab these graphics, grab these materials that you can use on social media, but also do more than that. Show up in St. Petersburg, Florida on August 31st for the rally. Go to pack the court on September 3rd and beyond, because the trial is supposed to last for a whole month, and show the US in this moment that these valiant warriors who have been working diligently to get African people free, to get reparations from the white community, working under the leadership of African people. These comrades cannot, be taken by the same government that we've already outlined in this whole presentation, has no um, uh, interest in freeing or not making a point, because the United States government, as always, will make the law and move the law so that it can favor itself, right? That's what colonialism is. Like, you just make stuff up. One point, slavery was illegal. At another point, slavery wasn't illegal. So it wasn't illegal, and then they created sharecropping and convict leasing and all these other kind of things to supplant that. And even the document that people say they want to uphold the First Amendment of the Constitution, which says that every American has the right to free speech, and political speech is covered underneath that, is being challenged by this trial. And African people are being insulted by this trial. Point blank, period. Like, we're being insulted by this trial by saying that Russia, some white man in Russia, was just like, you need to fight for your liberation. And you could do it all of these ways, despite the hundreds and hundreds of years of African people fighting for our liberation, fighting to be free, fighting for rights, fighting for identity and resolution and equality, democracy, all of these. Despite all of that, as Russian agents who are being told to do all of these things, which is what the government is saying, right? Like, these comrades are being puppeteered by Russia, when they do things like have a reparations campaign, when we do things like have a reparations tour, and we do things like visit Russia for a conference that we were invited to as a diplomat of the African nation, when we do things like talk about our disunity with the United States government and the foreign intervention in the Ukraine and Russia. Like, when we talk about all of these things that we are opposed to because we are freedom-loving people that do not unite with U.S. imperialism. And U.S. imperialism is just that, right? Like, if that's the fascism that you're talking about, to us, it's always been imperialism, domestic colonialism in this country. And in the world, this U.S. imperialism represents itself as colonialism still. So that is what I have to say. And I'm going to bring my comrade, I think we could bring it back up to um, open it up for any kind of discussion or questions. I've seen some comments and stuff when I was speaking, but voodoo.
Uhuru, I'm just raising my desk here. So yeah, we're gonna go ahead and go into the announcements. We will go ahead and have our Q&A section. Ooh, I'm tripping up words like you, comrade. So please prepare your questions. Remember to share your name and location and then your question. And let's go ahead and bring up those announcements. I'm gonna cue our producer Jay. All right. So again, we're wrapping up tonight's program, and I hope that you are motivated to contribute to the Mecca for African women in the form of the AWML Liberation Center. Before closing out, while the numbers are, before closing out, we want to make sure that we reach that $250 goal. I saw at least one donation come in. I'm going to go ahead and match Chess donation of $15. I'm gonna go ahead and put $15 of my own. So we go ahead and get those pledges in and donate. All right. So if you enjoyed tonight's program and are inspired or motivated, we call on African women worldwide to join the African National Women's Organization. We are the only anti-colonial, anti-imperialist, revolutionary organization for African women. Breathe down. Sorry. Don't breathe up. Don't breathe up. And we have members in Africa, Europe, Latin America, all around the United States. ANWO is leading on everyday issues concerning African women. We are not just on the internet. We are on the ground in our communities, organizing for African liberation. Join the international collective of African women building the revolutionary capacity of African women. To learn more about membership and to join, visit anwouhuru.org/join. ANWO is an organization of the African poor and working class. So we need your support to establish the international Mecca for African women. We are calling on members, followers, viewers, and anyone else that unites with establishing a working class embassy, a hub for community empowerment, and a testament to the resilience of African people. Don't wait till the program ends. Pledge your support now. I'm going to play this video. Let me know if the audio is coming through. It's not showing. Let me switch to the video.
We can't see or hear it, comrade.
Okay, yeah, I'm switching to the video now. Uh-oh. Okay. Jack, can you go ahead? There we go.
The African National Women's Organization Liberation Center is an ambitious initiative born from the vision to transform 4617 Natural Bridge Avenue into a vibrant facility. This space, generously donated by the African People's Education and Defense Fund, will become a working class embassy, a hub for community empowerment, and a testament to the resilience of African people. But we can't achieve this vision alone. We need your support to bring this dream to life. Your donation toward our goal of raising $60,227 will fund the comprehensive rehabilitation of the property. Why should you donate? Because every contribution brings us one step closer to providing working class African women with a property of their own, a place where they can heal, organize, and thrive. Why are we doing this? Because we are committed to advancing the cause of African self-determination. Our center will provide vital cultural, social, and community spaces that celebrate African people and serve as a catalyst for change. Additionally, as the headquarters of the African National Women's Organization, the center will serve as a national and local organizing space empowering African women and femmes in our struggles against the impact of colonial capitalism. Your support can make a profound difference in our efforts to uplift African women and femmes. Join us in our mission to strengthen our community, nurture resilience, and pave the way for a brighter, more equitable future. Together, we can ensure that the flame of African self-determination burns brighter than ever before. To donate,
All right, and switching back to there we go. Switching back to the presentation here. So, consider becoming a sustaining donor. If you don't have, if you want to give a big amount, and you don't have the big amount, consider, becoming a sustaining donor, starting at just $5 a month. We welcome one-time donations at any amount. So every dollar helps us buy a nail, drywall, flooring, plumbing. To donate anytime during this program or even after. But we want you to donate or pledge your donations now. You want to go to anwoahuru.org/donate. If you are in the St. Louis area and can donate your skills, please reach out to info@anwoahuru.org. We are, when we say we're rehabilitating, we're rehabilitating. So, Uhuru, we have Christina Laster in California is pledging $220. So that means we made our $250 goal, but we can still do more. We can still, we can still go ahead and surpass that goal. Because again, phase 2, we're looking to raise $30,000. And this is to completely rehab the inside. We have to bring the steps up to standard. We have to, like, flooring, HVAC. We want this to be a community organization. So if you, a community building, so if you're able to donate, go ahead and donate to anwoahuru.org/donate. Thank you, Comrade Christina Lasser. I love it. So additionally, wear your politics with ANWO. AWML shop features t-shirts, sweatshirts, travel bags, mugs, hoodies, and even socks. I'm in my fasting time, so I took my cup off the desk, but I have this cup, as you can see me. So visit anwellhuru.org/shop to look through /store. My apologies. And support uh, ANWEL's economic development project. Become a decolonizer. And that's what we call our distributors and buyers of Decolonized Hair and Body. Decolonized Hair and Body are natural personal care products that highlight ingredients and traditional care practices used by indigenous people around the world. In addition to featuring images and quotes of African revolutionaries, they are good. From our butters and our conditioners to oils, Decolonized have you covered head to toe. Here's my kapawasu. It took me a long time to pronounce that. Kapawasu butter uh, and nettle salve. And so make your next purchase of skincare products from us at decolonize.com. If you're in the St. Louis area, next Saturday, we're going to be at the One Africa, One Nation Marketplace. I'm excited. So all out, Yejide brought this up, but all out for the trial. Pack the courthouse. The federal government is moving forward with the bogus charges against the Uhuru 3, Chairman Omali Yeshitela, leader of the African People's Socialist Party, Penny Hess, chair of the African People's Solidarity Committee, and Jesse Neville, chair of the Uhuru Solidarity Movement. The trial has been set for September 3rd, 2024 in Tampa, Florida. The Uhuru 3 are calling on people to show up for this historic trial and to participate in the Not One Step Backwards march and rally on August 31st, 2024 in St. Petersburg, Florida, pushing back against the attacks. The charges against the Uhuru 3 reveal a historical and ongoing escalation of attacks on free speech, freedom to organize, and freedom to struggle for the liberation of African people, indigenous people, and all oppressed peoples around the world. Drop the charges on the Uhuru 3. Hands off with Chairman Omali, hands off Uhuru, hands off Africa. If you enjoyed tonight's program and would like to help us produce shows in 2024, volunteer with us. But ANWEL is looking for producers, interpreters, and chat moderators for future broadcasts and programs. Email us at info@uhuru.org if you'd like to share your skills. ANWEL's Economic Development Committee is growing and evolving with new opportunities. I mean, we have the One Africa, One Nation Marketplace. We have the funding for the ANWEL Liberation Center. And we are currently seeking a grant coordinator and donor coordinator. So if you're interested in learning new skills or have skills or resources to offer, send us an email at info@anwelhuru.org if you're interested. The committee meets bi-weekly. So the Work Council serves as a military decision-making body of ANWEL, providing strategic guidance and advice to the security forces and the defense members. The Work Council currently has openings for a deputy director of safety and security, emergency response coordinator, and training coordinator. The position descriptions are on the screen. If you're interested, again, reach out to info@anwelhuru.org. You must be an ANWEL member and in good standing to qualify for these committee positions. Again, I mentioned One Africa, One Nation Marketplace. This is going to be our third market, and each market, ANWEL is getting better and better, and we have better and better vendors out. If you are a entrepreneur, small crafts person, a farmer, food vendor, interested in becoming a vendor, reach out to oneafricaonenation.com/vendors to register. If you're in the St. Louis area, drop by and come see us. The annual team is always there and looking to meet new people. Study, fast, train, fight with Annual LA Tuesdays and Thursdays morning. Tuesdays and Thursdays mornings. Register at annualuhuru.org/events to get the link. And then join us on this upcoming Sunday, the 18th. Join President Yejide as she interviews Penny Hess, chairperson of the African People's Solidarity Committee, a white woman working under the leadership of the African People's Socialist Party, and one of the Uhuru Three who are currently indicted by the U.S. government, headed to trial on September 3rd. And lastly, but not least, Harriet's Daughters Book Club is a monthly virtual discussion that centers, and in person, I should say that, monthly virtual and in-person discussion that centers around African liberation related literature. Our September book of the month is Parable of the Sword by Octavia E. Butler. Published in 1993, it's set in 2025 California. The events and rhetoric of this Afrofuturistic literature is eerily resembles current times. The next discussion will be September 8th, 2024 at 3 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, 12 p.m. Pacific Standard Time, and it's open to African women, femmes, and those who are in solidarity with AMWO. Visit annualuhuru.org/events to stay up to date of all upcoming international, national, regional, and local events and programs. Uhuru, I think I'm out of breath now. All right, President Yejide. Let's see what the comments are. I've seen a lot of comments come in.
What do y'all think about fascism? Do you agree that fascism and Jay, if you want to pop on onto the camera too, if you have anything you want to add, that's cool. But like, I want to ask, the people out there, like, what do you think? Like, have you been in the throes of this fascist discussion, and do you agree that? I don't know if the word "agree" is the appropriate word, but do you agree with my analysis from tonight? We've been in this. Like, fascism is new, right? Like, we've been in these colonial oppressive situations for since our inception, as being attacked since being attacked by the Europe and being brought to these so-called Americas as enslaved African people. Because that's the only reason why we're here. I mean, like, generationally, I'm here because of my foreparents were kidnapped off the continent of Africa and brought to the so-called Americas and were enslaved. So yeah, please, y'all, give me your feedback.
I mean, I think you touched on a great point when you said that I love how you connected like things that we go through in everyday times as being arguments of fascism, like the redlining, the family policing. Those are actual fascist attacks and by a colonial institution.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yep. And, it's interesting to think about fascism as something that was, in a way, almost invented here, right? It was enacted on the native people, it was enacted on Black folks and other people as well, all sorts of colonized people. And they act like this is something that came out of World War II. And it's interesting to think about that in the context of using what happened in World War II as like a wedge, as like a, something to beat us over in order to support Israel, another colonizer country. But meanwhile, we experienced like 400, 500 years of, of what, Jewish people as well as Romani people and disabled people and Russians. I think like 12 million Russians are killed or something. So all these folks are experiencing that, in World War II, but that's like, maybe 10 years, maybe 15 years. And the really bad years were maybe like 4 years or 5 years. But we had like 500 years straight of like the worst possible thing that you can imagine. And every time, I think that I've heard the worst thing, and then it's always on Twitter or something. It's like, oh, this is the story of so and so, and this is what happened to them. And I'm just like, dear God, these people's ancestors were absolute monsters. They were actually monsters. Because what kind of human being could do some of the things that they did to us, using our hair to stuff their cushions? You know how there's a myth about George
His
Washington's
teeth.
wooden teeth? His teeth were not wooden. They were comprised of other slaves' teeth. Every time he would lose a tooth, he'd go to a slave, pull one out, and put it like, this is psychopathic.
Don't
Like, can
forget
you
the
imagine?
furniture
Cutting
made
off
out of
male
naked
genitalia
skin.
and putting it in jars, using skin as African people and other kinds of people's skin as what do you call those things? Mementos, or like travel, for postcards and so you know, and even the practice of, and I would say the practice of lynching African people in this country was sat around by white people, their whole family. They brought their whole family out for meetings and picnics while they hung or burned an African person. So, Black people could not say whatever we wanted to say. We couldn't even look folks in the eye. And walk on the same side of the street as them, or for fear, we couldn't even let our sons say or be Black boy joy. We couldn't do any of that because of the highly oppressive nature of living as an African person in this country. And I want to say, not only in this country, because what was happening here was happening on the continent of Africa, it's happening in Europe, it's happening in South America. So there are so many examples that we can call on without having somebody tell us that it was fascism, right? And even, like, I really want to emphasize that I think fascism is a cloak, is a cloak that dismisses the whole colonial question, because anti-fascists like to say we are against fascism, and that absolves them of really being against colonialism. Because anti-fascists could say I'm against colonialism when it impacts somewhere far, but to recognize that this is a settler colony and that white people are settlers and that they have domestically colonized African and other colonized people in this country, that is something that cannot be resolved, in my view, by just addressing fascist and what you're saying is fascist sort of behavior, which primarily is living in policy and challenging ideas, as opposed to changing the power dynamic, real power dynamic that would really create the freedom that African people need.
Mhm. And it's one thing to think about how people are using the threat of fascism as an excuse to participate in the duopoly and support Holocaust Harris, as they're now calling her, for supporting the genocide. And um, you know so it's just wild, because like they're acting as if it's not just window dressing, like our elections. I saw a tweet earlier today that said something like, the ruling class will allow for the house to be redecorated if it keeps people from burning it down. And that's exactly what happens, just like back and forth, like the red team, then the blue team, then the red team, and then in the background, the business class is
Yeah.
donating to both. And people talk a lot about, I think it's called what, ALEC, the American, like basically it's the business
Mhm.
lobby. And they support a lot of Project 2020, but they also support a lot of
Yeah.
Democrats, you know? And so like either way, uh, these people are maintaining power. Also, people talk a lot about Project 2025. Recently found out that it's called Project 2025 because these plans are released every year. So there was a Project 2024, like this is literally something that's released every year and they just update it. But these are things that they're like literally already doing. And this has been a plan since Reagan was in office. Like this, we're seeing the end result of a 50-year plan that they had, that it led up to this point through their organizing, because unfortunately the left, or what it exists of the
Yeah.
left in the US, is, hasn't organized the same way. But of course, that's because we don't have the resources, and especially Black folks are so focused on just getting by, for good reason, because we have occupying a militarized occupying force in all of our cities and towns, people that do not live in the same area, that come into town to enact violence and just force their authority onto people. And
Yeah.
anyways, not that I ramble on this topic forever, but let's not even get into the police as a tool of
Yeah.
capitalism, because that's a whole nother lesson.
But it's
I think,
all part of the same pie.
yeah, I think you may. I always say I think, but I know I do that as a matter of just speaking, to say I think a lot. But what you said about the people who funded Project 2025 and probably Project 2024 and all these things, there's traces that some of these organizations also fund the social justice, racial justice movement. They give money to organizers on the ground, grassroots organizations on the ground too. So the same money that's funding protests and your posters that said Black Lives Matter are also funding this policy work that is being implemented by the so-called right? And I think just the question of like fear mongering is real. And that's what the Democratic Party is doing right now, is really fear mongering. Like there was a text I said, I don't know who I told this to, but I got a text from, I think it was Cory Booker or something. I
Oh,
don't know
you
how
told us.
Yeah.
The
huh?
IEC. You told the
Yeah,
IEC.
yeah, it was a text message, like a political text message, and it was, I don't like, how did I get on this text thread? Anyway, the call was, let's stop the MAGA Republicans. And it didn't have anything about policy, a plan, what the Democrats were going to do, but it was a fundraising text message that basically called on people who they thought were registered as Democrats, which I think I am, um, is to fight or help keep the MAGA Republicans out of office. It didn't say how, but to do it, but then also you had to donate. And
Through
yeah,
magical thinking. That's how they're
I
gonna
mean, it's
do
this
it.
fear mongering thing. And then I think even with that Kamala Holocaust Harris video that was making its rounds this week of her chastising protesters, and she said, "You don't want me to speak? Trump will speak for you." It's just the same kind of thing. It's like you're drawing a line. Like, what are you
Correct.
saying? You're making this dichotomy
Mhm.
that makes it say that you either vote for me or you vote, and if you don't vote for me, then you're basically essentially allowing for a Trump to come into office, and that's very
Right.
dangerous.
Like, what if Trump gets elected, Like, their whole thing is gonna be like, "Throw up their
I
hands. Well, I
tried
tried. Well, I tried. I tried. I voted. I did that one thing
every four.
every 4 years. So that's all I could do. So you're
Yeah.
on your own. Good luck with fascists," like, seeing them be like, oh, like, telling Palestinian people, like, "Oh, like, Trump is gonna be so much worse." And I'm like, "Look at the pictures of Gaza. How could it get any
I mean,
But
worse?
even when it
Truly.
first
It could
started,
not. They had slicing machines in the missiles that just left 100
correct.
body parts. There was not a single soul that had a full body. Like, how does it get worse than
yeah.
that?
And even
How?
even before it was it October 8th of last year when this so-called first started, which we know that the Palestinian and Israel occupation in Palestine has been going on for since the 70s. But even when that attack first happened, they were like they voted for Hamas to be their leadership. It's like they just wanted, if not ignoring the fact that uh, Hamas was placed in power by Israel in the first place. But again, as Jay said, that's another episode for another day. but even just the way that we are often, propaganda is always used against us, is used against our nativity to push this fascist, colonialist, imperialist rhetoric onto us, that we if Trump wins, we voted for Trump. You didn't vote for Kamala, or y'all voted for Trump, or if it is Kamala and she goes in and does absolutely nothing for African people, which we know which will happen because it's the colonial structure. It's not just her as a person. It's like you voted for her. You voted for higher gas prices.
Do you all
Oh, go
remember?
ahead.
Sorry, not to cut you off, but do y'all remember how right before Biden was elected, everybody and their mother was screaming about children in
Correct.
cages. AOC did that whole photo shoot of the like devastation on the fence and pretending to cry, and like people would not shut up about kids in cages. And what's one of the first controversies that came out of Joe Biden's presidency in terms of immigration?
Rip,
The whipping of the
correct.
Haitians. So we're sitting here like, oh, vote for kids in cages. First of all, the kids are still in cages. There's way more kids in cages because Biden is really bad at immigration. And we saw with our own eyes, they're sitting there chasing after Haitians, whipping them like they're slaves. Like, and it's the same thing now where Kamala is actually trying to be more strict in a way, or not even in a way. She's like, oh, Trump's policy is too lax. Too lax? Like, in what world? In what world is our current immigration system too lax? Only a fascist would think that. Like that is just beyond.
We should
It's
have
just
built a
beyond
border around
ludicrous.
the continent of Africa.
I don't know if that would have
Well,
stopped the colonizers.
they'll find a way to dig
So
up
when they
under
find a way,
all of what they need is on the continent. We gotta destroy them where they
look,
sit. And
correct.
yeah, I mean, I think one of the things that is really devastating to me is the lack of deep critical thought and historical memory of our people,
Well,
and a way that you create a situation where something crescendos and when it's done away with, you're like, oh, thank God, it's not like I was thought. So this is gonna be better. And so I'm speaking of the fact that Biden was running, and then he dropped out, passed the torch to Kamala, and then people who were feeling devastated because of Biden didn't represent the hope for U.S. democracy now are celebrating the top cop.
Right?
right. Yep.
Top
And
cop.
you mentioned people that don't have the historical memory and people that don't think critically. This is what happens when you don't utilize or engage with historical materialism. This is what happens when you don't know how to think dialectically. Like these are things that like as socialists our brains are
Mhm.
trained to think about. And this is why it's so dangerous. This is why they hate socialism. Our government hates socialism so much because it is absolutely like if everybody understood dialectical materialism and historical materialism, there would be
Yeah.
no US. There would be a liberated nation and Africa would be liberated, but so many people just don't have that analysis. And I feel like that's part of our job, at least my job, is to help other people understand that. And I hope people that are watching this as well, people that identify as socialists, that understand dialectical materialism and historical materialism, that you like tell your family, friends, like, and explain it in a really non-complicated way if you can. And if you haven't heard about it, like folks out there, like look it up, like Google historical materialism, dialectical materialism, read about it, and really like internalize it because as a tool, it's really
Yeah,
useful.
and it's not hard too. Like you know everything. You know your experiences. You know the experiences of African people. And I think what we are challenged by on a day-to-day basis is that everybody is telling us what we should be saying as opposed to what we already know, and we know how to communicate it. But
there's an outside influence on how we're able to communicate that, right? So there's this fear mongering that happens that makes you think that something worse is happening if you don't do this or say this. You can be challenged by regular everyday people who want you to move in a certain kind of way. So we are challenged on a day-to-day basis based on what we know and understand. I just want to say to African people, you know what's happening. You know it. And it's okay to dissent from popular opinion. It's okay to dissent from family and friends who might argue. If you say you ain't dealing with this Kamala Harris person either. Or
Right.
if you're saying that, like, what does this mean in the terms of freedom? If Biden wins, I mean, if Harris wins, if Trump wins, what does this mean? Like, are we going to get free? Like, if I mean, because people don't
No,
think Trump is going to give us freedom, right? But Harris definitely ain't. She the
Ain't
top
she gonna
cop.
give us this? Top cop.
She top
Said, said
self-appointed top
hundreds
cop
of
in
men said,
California that people had a
correct.
contradiction with, right? Before she came into vice presidency. Now she's the top cop of she's the prosecutor. She's gonna be a top cop of
the top cop in
chief,
chief,
right?
the prosecutor in
Dropping
chief.
bombs on Israel. She might drop bombs on your community like Wilson Good did. He was an
Correct.
African in Philly. You know what I mean? Like, and lock you up. And we are dealing with a Uhuru 3 case right now underneath the Biden Harris government, who accused not only our chairman Penny Hess and Jesse Neville of being a foreign agent, but have locked people up for this. Are still saying that Assata Shakur is a political prisoner in Cuba, who are maintaining the same status quo that has always been maintained. And this is this is the so-called liberal or progressive these are very loose terms.
Very
I
loose.
don't mean that they are progressive or liberal, but like these are what people are thinking is going to be the better choice. And I just want to say, have faith in yourselves, organize yourselves, because the reality is that we're going to have to fight to get free, just like our ancestors did. We
Absolutely.
don't have nothing today that did not require the blood of our ancestors. And that I don't mean just voting blood.
Correct.
I mean decapitation blood. Right? Like, I mean poisoning blood. Like our foreparents had to fight down to their socks they ain't had no socks, down to their feet and their toes to make sure, cut through bushes, dropped out of trees on some colonizers, you know what I mean? To make sure that they could stay and remain free and make sure that future generations can have some semblance of freedom, even though we didn't have that totality of freedom. And I don't always want to sound like I'm ready to cut heads and burn houses, but I'm ready to cut heads and burn houses, y'all. And that is
It's a fight.
the majority of us are not there, but I'm hoping through our process of doing these videos and being online and talking with you that we can collectively move in that direction. And I know we're over time, but I wanted to say that I unite with what Jay was saying in terms of being organized, right? Like, I don't know if African internationalists can fall in line with the left. Like, it's impossible. Like, the left as an organizing group are a mixed bag of everything. And none of them, as far as I understand it, is talking about freedom and liberation and destroying the very basis of the system. They want to maintain it in some kind of way. Unless you're an anarchist, they don't care about no kind of state, right? But African internationalism is about getting free and using African people ourselves as being the leadership of our own state, our own unified African state that will free African people and use the resources to improve the conditions of African people all over the world. But we got to fight for it. And
Absolutely.
and fascism is not, fighting fascism, while it may be a road to helping you get your chops up, is not it, y'all. Y'all got to become anti-colonialists, and you got to fight for the freedom of yourself and your people.
True. Good night. Before we
Mhm.
depart, I just want to shout out everybody. Salute to everybody that came out. We got Chess from Portland, Oregon. All right. Extreme Hindu nationalism is at play here as part of the neo-colonialism, but it's particularly virulent expression of it. Who I have to do. I
It's a
know
whole
myself.
nother
I have to
show.
do. Right. I have to do more.
We could talk about. I could talk a lot about that. But yeah, we're out of time.
But shout out to
we need to do
Columbus, Georgia.
Again.
Yep, we got Columbus, Georgia in the house. New Orleans.
I saw North Carolina.
North Carolina. We got
we got California up in here because we got Christina.
We got Christina and Don out in Cali. So just want to shout out to everybody who is watching this live. If you're watching the rebroadcast, continue to comment, like, share.
Yeah, we gotta tell y'all to share when y'all be watching us live. Share out, y'all. We want to get more viewers. But also, I want to also say that thank you for Christina, Kayla, Coco, and everybody else who might have donated. Chessie, and I want to call them Chessie so bad because they do that all the time. Chessie. But thank you so much for tuning in, and definitely tune in on Sunday when my guest will be Penny Hess of the Hoover 3. It's going to be a really good conversation. Thank you so much. And